welcome to our podcast called Leading at a Local Level, where we explore leadership topics and ideas that are relevant to people leading at a local level, leading at a local church, or managing or leading a small organisation, small charities, leading a home group, worship team. And I'm thrilled to be joined again with my good friend, John Greenall. Both of us are very passionate about leadership. We've led in lots of different environments, both in local churches and in charity organisations. And so today we're going to be exploring a new topic, and it's going to be called the power of follow through. The power of follow through. So, John, do you want to open up this important topic for us?
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Tim. So, hopefully, as people are getting used to now, we're starting with a real life problem. Something which we want people to kind of send in and say, how do we approach this, and kind of digging down to the principles that are underlying that problem. And today we're going to be hearing from Joe. So Joe has been leading in a medium-sized church for 5 years. He's a really gifted leader. People find him inspiring. He brings energy. One of those kind of people. He's also kind and supportive, and people like him. And initially, in the church venture, in the early couple of years, he had lots of enthusiastic volunteers, but now things are different. So it's 5 years in, and people seem a bit less engaged. They seem a bit more skeptical of his ideas, a bit less interested in getting involved. And Joe, has gone and done his personality leadership assessments, and they say to him, look, Joe, you're good with ideas and with innovation, but actually you're weaker at the detail. At completing tasks as well. And so he kind of said, this is great, this is who I am, this is how God's made me to be. But the reality is that the projects that he started are often left unfinished, and it leads to others needing to pick up the pieces. And so Joe comes to you and saying, look, I need to restore some credibility, and I want to kind of find some motivation to be better at following through. But then again, this isn't who I am. So how do I deal with that issue? So we're thinking about the idea of following through. Joe is struggling with following through on stuff that he started, with a lot of the consequences that I've just described there. So Tim, thinking about that example, why is it so important, this issue of following through?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, it's worth saying that I identify a great deal with Joe. I totally understand how Joe feels. That is naturally my personality. I am naturally a kind of a good with ideas, bad with details kind of guy. And the reason I think it's important is for two reasons, really. I think that really, I think we're going to explore it together. But I think that both your credibility, Joe's credibility as a leader, is defined by what he completes, not just by what he starts. And there are so many people that can start stuff, but the leaders that I've admired over the years are the ones that can take an idea and drive it through. There's so many good ideas that happen. But also, I think the reason it's so important, I think as a leader, we can get discouraged. Discouragement is a big issue for leaders at every level, whether you're leading a local church or a home group, or whether you're leading you are, John, in a charity sector environment. You can get discouraged very easily because sometimes you just don't see the progress that you would like to see in the short term. And actually, I think we live in a very instant culture. I can't drink instant coffee. I'd just like to point out, but if we do, you can make everything super quick. You can microwave it, and I think so many leaders are looking to microwave success. Yeah. And actually, I just don't think it's possible. So I think this whole idea of understanding what follow through is and how to do it well is both vital for your credibility to lead and lead well over time. But I think it's also really important for you as a leader and your mental well-being and just your walk with God, that you're not just giving up before you've really seen the benefits. So I think it's such an important subject to explore, don't you, John?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Tim, and that really resonates with me as well. And I get very excited by things that are sort of shiny and new as well. And I think many leaders do, or we see something that's happening across the road, or in another church, or something we've read about online, or we read a book which so neatly packages together, like how this church went from 5 people in a living room to 5,000 people, and we think, I want to get there. And I think for me, Tim, I mean, probably my question that comes from that is, we see that big picture, we see kind of where we want to get, we have these big ideas, but then we struggle with how to actually put that into practice. So what might be some ways we think about, trying to reach our destination? What advice would you have for how we might get there?
Yeah, I think for me, what I've learned, is to focus on the power of small steps, particularly just the power of small steps. And because everything happens by small steps, right? We think about great progress. You could quote Neil Armstrong or whatever. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. And I think we want progress to happen in big jumps, and particularly pastoral stuff. Like if you're involved with people, discipling leaders. If you're trying to multiply leaders, you want to see gains very quickly. And there's so much stuff out there that promises big gains, and you hear, I don't know about you, John, but a number of leadership talks, and take a big risk and do all this stuff, and there's moments for that. There's moments to sell, to bet the family farm, on an idea. But actually, the majority of stuff happens through a series of small steps and small battles that were won over time. And then you look at this decisive moment, but really it's a series of small steps. I was recently reading a bit of the history of the racial movement in America, Martin Luther King, and really so much of what he did was just winning small battles in small towns again and again and again, and it kind of built momentum over time. And often those battles on a small level were really difficult and very hard fought, and maybe progress seemed at the time limited, but when you package it up as a whole, it became very important. And I think I think that's really important, for me, is identify what is it that you've talked about it, isn't it? Where do you want to get to? How do I break that down into small manageable steps? How do I take my vision and break it down into small manageable steps? I don't know, do you do similar stuff with your organizations?
Yeah, very much so. And it just reminded me, and we were talking earlier about the how to run like a marathon, or let's even say 5K. And that's the incredible thing about the Couch to 5K process. These guys just designed that program, and it's taken off hugely. Why? Because it breaks down into manageable steps. The person who is actually a couch potato, who says, how am I ever going to run 5K? And look at it. Look at the tremendous energy that people have by saying, yeah, week 1 completed, or I'm back to, I've done week 2, but I've had a few weeks off and I'm back to the start. And there's that concept of, it seems to be present there actually in areas like that, with these kind of manageable, identifiable steps. So yeah, I definitely see that, and I guess it raises questions for me again as to, okay, why is it that so often in leadership, exactly as you've described it, we see these big things and we think we're going to get there? Why is it that we struggle so much in our leadership to break it down? And I don't know, is it the patience? Is it that sense of context of which story am I in and where do I fit into this? It's not all about what's happening now, but I'm part of a bigger picture. What would you say to that?
I think it one of the things that I guess we're going to draw out again and again is good leaders take time to plan. And I think if I was talking to Joe in this situation, I would say that if you've got an idea, break it down into small steps. Start. Say I want to, in a local church, I want to disciple leaders, right? So how am I going to do that? How am I actually going to approach it? It's all really good saying, right, I'm going to run a big course, or I'm going to do this. It's often grand, but actually just sort of like, no, I'm going to meet with someone once a month for a cup of coffee, or I'm going to have them round to my house once a week for dinner, and I'm going to see the small steps. If I'm trying to get a national, I know you've been working super hard, haven't you, on these catalyst teams that are going to change the way that medical doctors and nurses and that can work together for the good of the kingdom. And it's been slow going for you, hasn't it? It's been, you want a national network of teams, and you and I've worked together, but it started out with just finding one or two, isn't it? And just start with one or two, and that was your plan. How's it going, John?
Oh, I'm just laughing because I find it so hard. I'm like, I can see where I want us to be, and I sometimes think with the sheer force of personality, I could just tell everyone this is what it's going to be like, guys, right? Okay, so from the center, this is what we're going to spend our money on, and you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And I'd like to think that that would work. Of course, it wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work. And yeah, just you're right. Just starting with one team and then sharing the good news and saying, like, we've made this step. And I'm so impatient, Tim. I think that's my big problem, is that I just sometimes think I'm in too much of a rush to see things happen, and I don't appreciate that actually what's going on is often more than the end product, but it's actually building into people. So if I know that if I build that vision into others, and that's what these people say leadership isn't about getting things done, it's about helping others to get the mission done, if you like. So it's about achieving the mission through other people, not that we use other people, but that we actually very much sense how God has shaped them, and we're seeing them accomplish their purposes, the things that God has called them to do. Ephesians 2:10, the things that God's planned in advance that they will do individually, but actually linking it to that big picture. And so I found real joy in that. It's helped me with my impatience to see, John, it's not just about this end product. It is also about the journey. It's also about what is God doing on the way in my life, in these people's lives, in our organization's life, and marking off, the steps as we go and say, that's a success. Praise God for that. That wasn't easy. That change of heart, that change of culture in an organization or in a church, that's hard to do. It takes time and patience and loving people and drawing them to that goal. We can't sidestep it. We cannot shortcut that kind of growth. Has been my experience, certainly where I work at CMF.
And in some ways, it's so small, isn't it? Often, and I think actually good leaders, the way to break that desire for impatience is to see it as a process of small steps. And I think that's really important. Can I just share with you the next key that I think is really important if I was to say, so I think the first thing I'd say is start small.
Small steps,
break it down into manageable steps. The second is don't underestimate the power of repetition. Power of repetition. Again, leaders find this really difficult. Particularly if you're like a very creative person, you want to go on to the next thing. I read a quote by John Piper, which said something like, I can't remember exactly, but it was something like, you chop down a tree with an axe by repeatedly hitting the tree. You can't hit through the tree in one chop. Recently, I actually had to, in the summer during lockdown, I had to take out 4 tree stumps. I took down 4 these horrible conifer type things that were in my garden, and it took me 2 days of manual labour to get out of these tree stumps. And it was literally like digging. And I think because I'm learning this principle of leadership is that every spadeful of earth that I removed from around the tree, and for every time I sawed one of the 75 roots that were coming out of this tree, I was getting one step closer to the completion of the goal. And I think sometimes, so much of ministry and leadership is monotonous and repetitive, but actually don't underestimate the power of doing the same thing again and again. I think sometimes there's been a lot of chat recently in leadership journals and talks, and about like, if it's not working, just drop it and move on. But I don't know. I think that you have to be very careful. You have to balance that with the power of repetition, the same thing again and again and again. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as I say, the thing about me that likes bright, shiny new things can sometimes think, oh, that's a bit boring. I'll kind of put that into second place. But wow, it's a discipline. But I think, as you say, again and again, you just have to sort of study the great leaders. We hear about their exploits, we hear about the stuff they say on the stage, but what we don't see is behind the scenes, the stuff that doesn't get as much airtime or as much book time. It's because it's repetitive and monotonous. They've prepared hard. They've prepared for years. They've done things over and over again. Just the law of Matthew Syed's book, Bounce. You're looking into high performers who have just repeatedly practiced their, whether it's Beckham with his crossing or Lampard with his penalties in football senses, or any discipline. It often comes with that hard, unseen, and repetitive work. I mean, where else do we see this, Tim? You talked about sort of in the church, but where else in life might we see the fruits of just kind of repetitive, monotonous?
Oh, I'd love to encourage those of you that are parents, particularly with children that are younger. Like I think we try and, Helen and I and my wife, we're always talking about, whether we're getting it right with our kids or not. And I think kids are slow to learn, like they're quick to learn in some ways. But when it comes to character is shaped over time. You cannot make good quality character quickly. And so the only way to make good quality character is by repeatedly emphasizing the same things, picking them up on their manners at dinner time, or enforcing kindness again and again, or being consistent with what you're doing again and again and again. And sooner or later, I think they get it. I don't know about you, how you handle your kids, John.
Yeah. Again, I want I want snap obedience, and I wish they'd listen the first time. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's that repeated day in, day out. Sometimes annoyingly so. But yeah, it takes great patience. And Tim, just hearing you say that, yeah, I just want to encourage people who are listening. I think so many people, we celebrate those who are out there on stage, who are seen for doing things, and we naturally celebrate that. But I just really want to encourage and affirm those of you who are doing this. It's totally unseen. That's why sort of discipling your kids, it's just unseen. Very, very few people see it. You won't get much thanks. You often don't get any thanks from your kids. And it's hard work. I just want to affirm you in that, from what Tim's just been saying, to keep going, and your church as well, unseen, faithful, week in, week out, preaching the word, discipling, pastoral ministry. God sees even when human beings don't.
Amen.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think we're rewarded as ministers, as leaders, actually less for our success and more for our faithfulness.
Yeah.
And there's being faithful, stupid faithful, which is just mindlessly doing the same thing again and again because you've got nothing better to do. But I think we have to be careful about all the talk about innovation and exciting stuff, that we don't just recognize the underestimated power of just repetition, really. So that's good.
Yeah. So Tim, you've talked about the power of small. You talked about repetition. So going back to Joe, who's got this issue of starting things and getting people on board, and then really struggling to follow through. What would be your next bit of advice for him?
Well, I need to cough. I don't know what's happened to my. I just got something stuck in my throat. Sorry, there we are. I think this: let your yes be yes, and your no be no. That's what the Bible says, right? Yeah. I think it's a principle. Let me tell you. I don't know about you, John, but leaders trade in trust. They do business in trust. Yeah. All of my work as a leader is done in trust, right? And the longer you go on in leadership, the more trust becomes important. And when you are consistent over time, when you do what you say you're going to do, and you don't do what you say you're not going to do, people trust you. It's like your kids. Your kids trust you. If they say, "Dad, can I have a biscuit?" and you say no, but they know 5 minutes later that you come back and they're going to hassle you, you're going to say yes. They can't trust what you're going to say. And it's like that as leaders. I think we need to recognize that we trade in trust. And so think very carefully, Joe, this would be what I'd say to you. Think very carefully. Do not make promises. Do not set vision, right, that you cannot see God being able to deliver, or you being able to follow through on. Because if you do it too often, you could, once or twice, fine. It doesn't always work. People can accept that. That won't necessarily damage your trust. If it becomes a pattern, your trust will erode very quickly, and your currency with which to trade, you won't have any, right? So you won't be able to lead. People will stop following. You won't be able to get any followers, because they're just like, well, he's going to start, but he's not going to finish. So, and I think that to me is so important. Get your yes be yes and your no be no. Yeah,
fantastic. I sometimes think of how much change have I got in my pocket, in different areas of my kids, might be in my workplace. How much of that trust change currency have I got? That is absolutely fantastic. It reminds me, it feels to me, Tim, that Joe is in that position where he feels like he's sort of lost some respect, and we mentioned him sort of feeling like he lost credibility. I think that was what we saw him say, and it just brought to mind, that line when people say, honor is something that we give, but respect or trust is something that is earned, and something we're called to honor our leaders. So if you're in Joe's congregation, you're called to honor him. But actually, when it comes to trust and respect, that is something that Joe is responsible for. And if that's been eroded, then actually I'd say, agree with you, say to Joe, as a leader, it's actually your responsibility, Joe, to actually to help people to learn to trust you again, even though that they should, be honoring you as the leader. So yeah, honor is given freely, but trust is earned. Would you agree with that? I mean, that's.
Oh, 100%. If I was saying to Joe right now, if I was, and I do support leaders in different situations, my big advice would be go back to small. Go back to small things and deliver them and deliver them well and rebuild that trust. Stop setting big vision and big ideas, but go back to, preach a really good preaching series, right? And finish it, and finish it well and do it really good quality. Go and, if you're going to run an activity, do it and say you're going to do it. If you're going to run a coffee morning for the old folks, do it and do it consistently. But pick out small wins, repeat them, and sooner or later it will rebuild your trust. But it's a slow process.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful, and just thanks Tim for that. That's really helpful. Go back to the small, go back to the beginning and deliver. That's and that's a word for me, I think, as well, because I'm so easily fixate on the big things, but actually building trust in the small, that's so good. So we talked about those things, the small, repetitive, and then we just talked about let your yes be your yes. And what else would you say, Tim, to Joe?
One thing I've learned, so I'm not, I don't, John and I have come across a thing called the Belbin test, right? It's a model, one of these many personality models, and it categorizes people. I think it's in 9 mind blocks, and one of them is somebody called a completer finisher, right? And they're specialists almost. They love to finish off projects. I am the opposite of a completer finisher, right? And so much of my leadership has failed basically because I don't have a strategy for the final 10%. Right. Okay. So I can organize an event. I often have to organize conferences and stuff like that. And I can get it all in place, got the date sorted, the venue sorted, I've got the speakers lined up. And then I forget to kind of, I've even created the promotional activities, but I might have forgotten just to send them out, and I suddenly discover like 3 weeks before we're meant to go, oh no, I never did that. And I've working really hard at having a strategy for completing that final 10%. So I've got people that now help me. I've actually got one of the ladies in church that volunteered. She's like, I know you're bad at finishing. And I'm like, yes, I am. And she's like, can I help you? So she will communicate to the church on my behalf about activities. Okay. She will remind me. She actually texts me. She's like, you need to send out an email about this. I'm like, thank you for doing that. Thank you for reminding me to do that. And I'm not in a big enough church to afford a paid staff. She does it for free. Have a strategy. How can you make sure when you start a project, you start an event, how are you going to finish it? What's going to be the last bit that you're going to find difficult? Spend more time thinking about that final 10% sometimes than the rest of it.
Yeah, well, that's really good, Tim. I mean, what I'm intrigued there is that Joe said right back at the beginning, he said, look, he's really good with ideas and innovation, but weak at details and completing tasks. So I'm seeing some kind of similarities to you here. So, and you've talked about, engaging somebody else. What would you say? Because I hear sometimes people say, well, I'm just no good at that. I'm not a completer finisher. I'm not a detail person, and so I'm not going to do it. But what you seem to be saying is is it your responsibility to become that person, or you've kind of hinted already that you're drawing someone else in to kind of help you in those weak spots? How can we do that without saying, well, this is who I am, and I'm just going to let everyone else get on with it? How do we approach that last 10%?
There are a few people that are so brilliant at something that they can kind of afford to just be rubbish at other stuff. There are but I would say that is a handful of people, like a real handful of people. You can be, I mean, Steve Jobs was not a nice man to be around. He was quite temperamental, he was very rude, but he was a genius, right? And he got away with it because he was a genius, right? Leading at local level, the chances are you're not a genius, right? Sorry to
crushing reality
to you, right? You're probably not a genius, which means that you cannot have, right? You're going to have areas of strength. Everyone's got areas of strength, and you need to play to your strength. But you cannot have what I would call a debilitating weakness or crushing weakness. If you cannot close up your big weaknesses at the bottom, all your strengths are not going to be strong enough to pull you beyond that. Good. You've got to stop. You've got, in a sense, I realise that my leadership is limited by my ability to finish things well. Joe, you could be me, to be honest. And I am learning to be better at finishing. Because if I can't finish, then all the inspiration, the motivation, the new ideas won't have the gravitas, really won't have the power. So yeah, I don't know if you're the same, John. I mean, you're much better at finishing things than I am. So.
Well, no, but that very much resonates with me, and I think there are times when I have to say, well, this is who I am, take it or leave it, and then we can get into that sort of defensive mentality. If we're under pressure, people are criticizing us, we can just think, well, but you're not appreciating my strengths here. I want to be appreciated for what I do bring, and not criticized for what I don't bring. But I think and that's why leadership is so hard, isn't it, Tim? I mean, it's, as you say, we're often limited by our greatest weakness. And again, we've got a responsibility, not necessarily to go out and say, oh, I need to work on all my weaknesses. I do believe personally we need to work to our strengths, but equally we need to be thinking how, if these weaknesses are hamstringing this whole thing that we're doing, if they're leading to, and ultimately it's about the kingdom of God, isn't it? We're looking to build the kingdom of God. We're looking to see great things happen. We're looking to see God move. And if we're limiting that through our weaknesses, actually that's where we're called to be a team. We're called to, you're not just an island. There's no way that we can do it on our own. And I'd love to hear you say, just we're going to close in a minute, Tim, but the idea of team and about how you kind of you engage a team in that, understanding your weaknesses. How have you done that in a way that you found healthy and helpful?
Great question, John. I think one of the things that, again, these personality tests, if you've ever done them, almost you can kind of have an attitude, well, people need to accept me for who I am, right? Which, there's truth in that. Of course, you have to accept you for. But my experience is that people that are creative, right, kind of are only really genuinely understood by people that are also creative. And people that are details people are kind of only really truly understood by people that are also details people. And which is why I think that in a team, actually, the best thing you can do to honor your team is to recognize it's hard for a details. I've got one of the elders in my church. There's an amazing details guy. Like he loves to deliver. He's a complete finisher to the nth degree. But he does not enjoy my creativity a huge amount. But it's my job, and I think it's his job as well, to actually work not on his strengths as much as it is to work his weaknesses, to realize, actually, if I'm going to honor you, I honor you by working on my weaknesses, by not just expecting you to come up to where I'm at. I've got to come down, as it were, to where you are, in that way. And I'd say that the team can balance it out, and team does balance it out, but don't expect everyone else in the team to do all the work of coming up to understand you. You've got to recognize your weaknesses and actually work to because it's honoring to others. That would be what I'd say. It's so honoring to miss deadlines and be late for meetings because you're being creative. It's not honoring to them. If they're a finisher, if they're a details person, to leave the details person hanging because actually, like, you haven't got around to being organized. It's not honoring. It's not fair. Right. I mean, sorry if that's being a bit harsh, John, but I think that's how I see it.
No, I think you're right, and this is about honoring other people. So it's great, Tim. So great. I mean, as we finish this, we talked about the power of small, talked about repetitive actions, keeping going. We've talked about letting our yes be your yes, that we trade in trust, having that strategy for the final 10%. That's been fantastic. As we finish, Tim, anything you'd like to add as we come to a close?
I think just real quick, I'd say, one thing I found really helpful, time limits. Again, time limits in season. Do stuff for a season. Don't feel like you've got to keep repeating things forever. Say, I'm going to do this activity. We're going to do it for a term. Or we're going to do it for a year, or we're going to do it for 6 weeks, or whatever it is. But sometimes that's a really good way of completing through on something without actually kind of, letting people down when you said because you finished it, after it's run its course, kind of thing. So just as don't be afraid to put time limits on things would be my final thought.
That's great, Tim. Really enjoyed that conversation. Really helpful for me. The power of follow through and how important that is. So, good chat.
Yeah, nice one. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
If you want to share it again, it's gonna. This has been helpful. We really encourage you to share it with your friends. Just share it with your churches. It's going to be under the MLG YouTube banner. We'll put the links in for you to attach to find. So hopefully we'll see you next time.